Hello and welcome back. Now, I hope you all enjoyed the first week of hockey being back as much as Jack Eichel did. At the time of recording on Saturday night, he has a goal, 5 assists, 6 points, 8 shots in just 2 games. And if you watched my week 1 video and you picked up Ivan Barbashev, he racked up 3 goals, 3 assists, 6 points in 2 games with a couple of shots, 3 hits, and 2 blocks. So that is really good news for all of us here who stream players and who ended up picking up some of those guys. But who can we look for in week 2? We're going to go over some of the schedule quirks here and some of the waiver ads and some goaltending at the end. But first, let's do like we always do and take a look at the schedule breakdown. So this week, there's 6 teams with 4 games. There's 4 teams with 2 games. You can see those at the bottom. Calgary and Minnesota, 2 games, both on heavier nights. You're gonna want to stay away from those guys, and if you have those guys, you're going to want to stream somebody with those off-night games, and we'll get into those. Toronto has 2 with 1 late-night game, and Winnipeg 2 with 2 late-night games, so not the worst if you have those Winnipeg Jets. In terms of the best schedules, we're looking at Colorado and Pittsburgh, both with the perfect Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Sunday. Now, Monday has 6. It's a little bit light. Wednesday with 4, Friday with 3, and Sunday with 3. And then obviously Saturday the heaviest, Thursday with 11, and Tuesday with 9. So you're going to want those light night games. Of these 2 schedules, I would prefer to have this Colorado situation. You can see here on the back end, you've got Anaheim Friday and San Jose Sunday. Those should be higher scoring games. The first 2 might be a little bit lower scoring. We don't know what to make of the Islanders yet, but Boston looks pretty good defensively. Then with Pittsburgh, you've got the perfect Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Sunday, and there is some travel. So Colorado all at home except for this last one, and then Pittsburgh away in Montreal, then home for a couple, then away to Winnipeg. So a little bit more travel, and they're a slightly worse team. We'll take a look at both of these teams in depth. Plus, you have New Jersey. They are back from their European trip. They have a Monday, Tuesday back-to-back, Utah at home, and then away at Carolina. They're on the road again in Ottawa, and then back home Saturday for the Caps. And then Anaheim down here, which will be part of this max game volume strategy. They play Wednesday, Friday, Sunday, so the perfect light night schedule after that Monday. So if you want those max games, you can take a team like New Jersey or like Florida, who also has 4 games. They've got the road back-to-back Monday, Tuesday. The Devils do have some travel involved, but they have the home game against Utah. Take your pick as to who you can find from either of these teams, but you grab one of those guys for these Monday, Tuesday back-to-backs. Then you go and pick up anybody from these teams that play Wednesday, Friday, Sunday, and you can get yourself 5 games. You can also do it a couple different ways. You can get these first 3 games from either the Devils or the Panthers, and then try to find 2 of these games, so that might be preferable. As we look at the best schedule of the week, Colorado, they have that perfect schedule, and we mentioned that before, but some of these guys are definitely ownable. So they have a ton of injuries right now. Lehkonen is out, Nichushkin's out, Landeskog's out, Drouin is out, and their power play units are changed because of that, so you're going to want to pay attention to that. So up first, we got Casey Middlestat, 18%, single position center, which is not preferable, but with that said, he is power play 1, as well as Ross Colton, who's 2% owned, single position center. They're both power play 1 right now. Both of them are on line 2 together, so that could be either one of these guys. If you're in a shallow league, maybe you take Middlestat. If you're in a deeper league, maybe you take Colton. One thing to note between the 2 of them, Colton does hit a bit more, 1.76 hits per game compared to 0.31, and he shoots a little bit more, 1.83 to 1.59 for Middlestat. Middlestat with the higher point ceiling, and with that skill level, he should be a little bit better on the power play. But Ross Colton in the past has been multi-position eligible. I think he would deserve that going forward because he's playing wing and center from night to night. But these are some options you have in terms of the top 6 in Colorado. You also have Nikolai Kovalenko. He's top line with McKinnon and Rantanen. He's on PP2. So that's not going to be as preferable in terms of power play usage. They're probably not going to give their second unit any time with all the injuries they have. Their second unit has Kovalenko, Ivan, and Callum Ritchie. So a couple of younger guys, new faces to this lineup. They also are running Sam Girard on PP2. So he's somebody to keep in mind. He had 2 assists in his first game, 1% owned. And that's crazy for a guy who's getting power play action. So Sam Girard, a really good power play type of player, really skilled, and he's only 1% owned. He did put up a couple points already. And then the last but not least, I do want to mention Justus Annunen and Capo Kakinen, who they claimed off of waivers. Georgiev, if he continues to struggle, they're going to pull the trigger relatively quick. That's my assessment. That may or may not be true in terms of what the coaching staff is thinking, but he did not look good in the first game. He did not look good in preseason, and they're probably going to need to pull the hook a little bit quicker than in previous years with all these injuries. They don't want to get off to a bad start. Now, the same type of schedule, you've got Pittsburgh. They've got that light night Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Sunday. And there's a couple of interesting developments here. So Brian Rust is back in the lineup. If he weren't, Drew O'Connor would be your best ad of the week. He was getting top 6 minutes and some power play time. 1 goal, 3 shots, 2 hits, and 3 blocks so far on the season. 1% owned, so nobody's on that train yet. So if you are in a really deep league, I definitely would like Drew O'Connor. He's very fast. He gets some time with Malkin and or Crosby, so that would be helpful. But right now he's on the third line with Eller and McGroarty, so maybe not the best line assignment. If you're looking for the best line assignment, look no further than Anthony Beauvillier, 4% owned, single position left wing, 2 goals in the game the other night, 9 shots, 2 hits, and then he's top line with Sidney Crosby. So you're going to want that exposure to Sid. And he's been paying off. He's kind of a journeyman at this point, played for the Islanders, kind of went all over the place, and then ends up in Pittsburgh in a nice situation for him to be able to rack up some points. Historically speaking, Rickard Rakell should be your best ad. He's dual position eligible, center right wing, 14% owned. If you look at his shot volume, 2.36 shots per game, 1.6 hits per game, and a couple blocks here and there. Half a point per game pace is a little low. As I mentioned, I featured him in one of the breakout videos as like the last breakout guy. Basically, if he can get that shot volume up to 4 or anything over 3, that would be some situation where you could get some value out of him, where you're getting a nice hits floor. Definitely not a point floor for this guy, but hits. He's been doing that pretty consistently over the last couple of years, and then the shot volume is the key there. Unfortunately, he hasn't started shooting yet this year, only 1 shot in each game, so that's something to keep an eye on. So of these guys, I would prefer a guy like Beauvillier for that line assignment, and then Drew O'Connor if you can't get him. One other note to make here, Erik Karlsson and Letang are playing Power Play 1 together, so that's interesting. If you own Letang, that's a nice little bump because he's getting some power play time. And you have Joel Blomqvist, who's gotten 2 starts on the season already. He's currently playing a game as I'm talking right now, so I'm not sure how his numbers look, but they looked pretty good at the time that I last checked them. He had a .923 save percentage, and he was above 900 in the first game of the season. So 6% owned Blomqvist, and they do not trust Tristan Jarry, apparently. He looked pretty poor in that first game as they lost 6-0 to the Rangers, so that is something to keep an eye on with Nedeljkovic still out. Now, another schedule we can talk about, another sort of home account, the New Jersey Devils. They've got a nice front-loaded schedule that you can get some value on. Utah and then Carolina. Carolina's a tough defensive team, but then they've got Ottawa, who's not necessarily known for their defense, and Washington, who is still coming together. They've got they only played 1 game this week, and so they have a ton of games to make up, and they still haven't shown us what they look like this year. But with Chychrun in, with Matt Royan, that could be a little bit of a different game. Of these guys, Paul Cotter obviously popped off in the first couple games over in Europe. 2 goals, 1 assist, 4 shots, but 7 hits. He averages over 3 hits per game. So that's the main reason you would have owned him last year with Vegas. Now he's on the third line playing with Haula and Nason. So both of those guys, Cotter and Nason, are on here. Cotter has some pretty good skill, a little bit more of a goal scorer. And I think that hit floor is going to be really nice for you if you're in a bangers league. 7 hits on the season so far. If you're looking for power play exposure, Nason is going to get that for you. He's on the second power play unit, the net front guy. He was really good in that role with Carolina, so that is one of the reasons you would grab him, as well as the dual eligibility, left wing, right wing. He's only 2% owned. He's got a goal and an assist and a power play point on the season so far. As you can see here, he's celebrating one of those power play points, or that goal he scored. But then you also have some power play exposure from Seamus Casey, 1% owned. He's got a power play goal, couple shots, hits, and blocks, and he's looking really confident on that second power play unit, really skilled, undersized, but playing really good with the puck. He is a little bit, difficult in his own end. He caused a little bit of a moving screen on one of those goals the other night. Markstrom didn't look too good the other night as well. But with that said, Seamus Casey with 1% ownership to get power play 2 exposure is, not that bad at all. And then you also have Thomas Tatar at 1%. You're getting him for the line assignment and the fact that he's had some familiarity with this team before. Second line with Hischier and Mercer. Mercer is available. He's around 18% ownership, but he just didn't look that great earlier on in the couple games that I saw him, making a couple of difficult mistakes. He's got to get a little bit more power play time and a little more confidence with the puck before I start trying to pick up Dawson Mercer. So these are some guys that I'm keeping my eye on for the New Jersey Devils waiver ads, especially if you're trying to do that 5-game swing with that front-loaded back-to-back Monday, Tuesday. The other team you could use for that is the Florida Panthers. So with Barkov's injury update, he's week to week with some sort of injury. And that means somebody else gets elevated in their line assignment. That guy is Anton Lundell, who you see here, 9% owned, single position center, 1 assist, 9 shots, and 2 hits. And he is line 2 and power play 1. So they're keeping Sam Bennett as the top line center with Verhaeghe and Rodriguez. And then second line is Luostarinen, Lundell, Reinhart as of now. So with that said, Rodriguez is my number 1 ad this week at 11% ownership, dual position eligibility, a goal, an assist, 3 shots, 2 hits, 2 blocks, line 1, PP1, everything you like to see. And he's done it before. The shot volume, usually around 2.5 shots per game, gets a couple hits in there as well and some power play numbers. Whenever there's an injury, he gets elevated in the depth chart, and then that usually pays off for whoever picks him up on the waiver wire in fantasy. So definitely want to get out in front of that with his line assignment right now. And then you also have Adam Boquist, who is technically listed power play 1. Now this is interesting because on Daily Faceoff, he is listed as a forward, even though obviously he's a defenseman, but they have been running with Balinskis. I don't know how to say that name, but he's on power play 2 with Ekblad. And then they've got Boquist quarterbacking power play 1. And then they have, I believe, Nate Schmidt also in the lineup. So that kind of bumped Boquist to the forward group, which is interesting. So if he's in the lineup, he's the power play 1 quarterback apparently, but I would not be surprised if they started to use Ekblad or Balinskis with that spot, because this kind of is all in flux after they lost Montour last year. So we'll have to wait and see who actually becomes that. At 11%, that's a little bit high, because if he's not the power play 1 quarterback, he's not necessarily your best fantasy option. So of these guys, I would like to go out and grab Evan Rodriguez with that dual position eligibility and that line assignment. Now, up next, we're going to take a quick look at the goaltending. There's a couple of guys that you can get off the waiver wire who might be able to do some damage for you going forward. First up for the goaltenders, we've got Devin Levi. Now, they have a back-to-back Wednesday at Pittsburgh, Thursday at Columbus, so he'll see at least one of those games. And to me, he's looked like the better of the 2 goaltenders between him and UPL. You can see his goal saved above expected, 86th percentile last year when nobody was really on him and he had to actually go back down to the AHL. He came back up, and when he was there, he was actually really good in terms of his goals saved above expected number. The team in front of him wasn't necessarily great, and he had a sub 900 save percentage, but this year he's above 900, and he's looking pretty decent in net, and this is a guy that not a lot of people drafted, so 10% owned. If you're going to look for one of those guys that could steal a starting job, he is one of the prime candidates. But speaking of guys that could steal that number 1 role, Justus Annunen. He's a guy who didn't play well when he got called in relief of Georgiev, but Georgiev didn't play well to start the game in that opener. So 18% owned. A lot of people are on this. I have him in one of my leagues. You can see here he's well above expected, similar to Devin Levi, but his save percentage last year, .928 with a 2.14 goals against, and he actually has a pretty decent 3-year average as well. Even though the games played volume is very low, he's been getting a little bit of time here and there, and then obviously taking that role and running with it with that save percentage and goals against. That's what you like to see. He didn't necessarily do that last game. He had a 500 save percentage or something like that because he let in 2 on 4 or something like that, and I hated that for my own team. But given the circumstances in Colorado, he's a guy that I would definitely keep my eye on if Georgiev is going to continue to shit the bed. Now, we also have a team that I don't necessarily like to pick from, but their starting goaltender right now is Lucas Dostal, who's at 9%. So they haven't played a ton of games. In fact, 1 game so far. As I'm speaking, they're playing it. And Lucas Dostal is 9% owned. He is their starter until they get Gibson back. So to have a starter, even though it's a bad team, he's going to get a bunch of saves. So 77th in terms of save volume last year, and that was only 44 games. So he was getting shelled. They were giving up 35 plus shots per game last year, and they haven't done much with their blue line in terms of solidifying it defensively. They've added in some offensive guys. But with that said, he's a guy that you can pick up off the waiver wire who's going to get a ton of start volume. Next week, they actually have a pretty decent, light night schedule. So 3 games, and he could get all of those starts against Utah, Colorado, and LA. Obviously, those 2 other games, all 3 of these games should be pretty difficult for the Ducks. Utah looks pretty good offensively this year. Same with Colorado, but they are running on a little bit of lack of depth right now with all the injuries they have. LA looks pretty decent so far to start the season, but at this point, if you're looking for a starter and start volume, you're not caring too much about the opponents. Now, another starter that you could potentially look at is Sam Ersson, and he is a 1A or 1B, whatever you want to say about it. But he is a guy that should be the number 1, or at least get that that long leash as the number 1. They do have Fedotov. Fedotov is around 15 to 16% ownership. Ersson 19%. So with that said, the team goals against is pretty good last year, at least 78th percentile there. The save percentage was bad because they completely fell apart at the end of the year. He wasn't ready for that number 1 role. If he's a 1A, 1B, that could potentially help his numbers. You saw he got 51 games last year because of the Carter Hart situation. He did win 23 of those games, so a little bit below 50% win percentage. But obviously, Philadelphia needs to get their goaltending situated because they've got a pretty decent team in front of them. Guys like Michkov come in, and they had Jet Luchenko make the team. He looked pretty good the other night. Tyson Forster scores. They get that nice win in Vancouver. So this is a team I'm looking at for a lot of fantasy value. There's a lot of guys that are potentially available. Ersson will probably get 2 or 3 games depending on how it goes. They've got Tuesday at Edmonton, Thursday at Seattle, and Saturday at Vancouver. Another guy you could use for that start volume is Peter Mrazek. Now, he's definitely going to get you saves. If you're in a points league that gets you 1 point per save or a high save volume type of league, he's a guy that works perfectly with the 0G strategy because nobody drafts him, and then he ends up on your waiver wire at 10% ownership, and you can scoop him up and get a ton of start volume and a ton of saves. You're not going to get a lot of wins. You might not get the best goals against. His save percentage was reasonable last year at .907, and the team defense is really bad. It should be slightly improved this year with Alec Martinez coming over and a little bit better offense to potentially keep the play in the other zone for most of the time. But with that said, you can grab Mrazek at 10%, and they do have a couple games next week, so he's going to get 2 or 3 depending on how it shakes down. But Tuesday at Calgary, Thursday versus San Jose at home, Saturday versus Buffalo at home. So not the worst opponents that you would want to face if you're the Chicago Blackhawks. There is some sort of winnable game situation there with at least 2 or 3 of those games, depending on if Mrazek gets them. I would definitely look to him off the waiver wire. And then not a starter, but a guy that I'm going to look at in terms of a good week, Spencer Knight. There's no data on him because he did not play hardly at all over the last couple seasons. The last year he didn't play, and then not a lot to go off of this year. But with that said, they do have that back-to-back Monday and Tuesday. Monday at Boston, Tuesday at Columbus. So he'll get one of those games. He's not looking too good as I'm recording this right now on Saturday night. He's got an .818 save percentage and has given up 4 goals. But with that said, he's going to get one of those 2 games. And at 8% ownership with a team like this who was really good defensively, I'm not sure if they still are, but we'll have to wait and see. That's going to do it for this one. If you made it to the end, thank you for watching all the way through. Let me know who you have your eye on going into week 2 in the comments section below. And as always, I'll see you in the next one.